Hey guys, it's Chris. From a legendary Model T surviving disaster to a radiated hearse, check out the 10 most amazing abandoned cars around the globe. Number 10. Formula One race cars abandoned in France. Things get abandoned, it happens. People leave their homes, their dogs, and yes, even their cars. Somewhere in the French countryside is a whole pile of abandoned Formula One cars. And I'm not exactly sure how they came to be rusting into oversized tin cans. These were once treasured beauties. The cars look as if, once upon a time, they were used in very real F1 races. They're even still being transported in a sense, rusting into dust on the back of a decaying transport rig-up. By appearances alone, the cars seem to have been left to ruin some decades ago. They're well into a phase of progressed deterioration. As for the origin of this batch of race cars, there are scant clues. Even the fellow who found them is unsure how they came to be resting in an overgrown part of this property. Funnily enough, the man who found the powerful sports machines is now selling them on Facebook for only 55 euros. Not 55 euros each, but 55 euros for the entire load of old cars. What do you think? Is 55 euros, which is roughly $60 US, a fair price for a collection of long-lost racing relics from Formula One? Don't forget, you have to go to France to get them though. Number 9. Lambo left in Athens Hotel. Hotels are perhaps the #1 place for abandoning all kinds of crazy things. Wives, wallets, and even morals. But how about a Lamborghini? And not just for a few days or a few weeks, but how about for 30 years? That's right, there was a Lamborghini sitting in the underground parking lot of a Hilton Hotel in Athens, Greece, from 1972 until 2002. It is probably no surprise that the man who left his incredibly expensive Lamborghini sitting in a hotel parking lot was kind of a big deal. In fact, his name was Stamatis Kokotis, and he was known as the Greek Elvis. He didn't even buy the car for himself. It was a gift from the same famous and ultra-rich shopping mogul who had married JFK's widow. Now, what kind of crazy story is that? Supposedly, the engine got sent back to Lamborghini to be repaired while the car itself got parked at the hotel. However, sometime later, nobody paid for the fixed engine and the car's owner either lost interest or completely forgot. This resulted in 30 years of hard storage for the beautiful vehicle. Thankfully, it was eventually released from the parking lot and went up for auction in the year 2012, reunited with its original engine. Number 8. Saddam Hussein's sons abandoned Ferrari F40. It is hard to think of anyone more nefarious in recent years than Saddam Hussein, and while this may not seem on the topic of abandoned cars, it actually is. Saddam Hussein's son, Uday Hussein, acquired a beautiful Ferrari F40 somewhere around the time of the Gulf War. This beautiful Ferrari was kept inside a huge collection of ultra-expensive cars until Uday was killed by the United States Special Forces in early 2000s. From here, the story takes an interesting car-like turn. When Uday Hussein died, the car had been in a garage getting worked on. Naturally, he was forced to abandon it due to leaving our current plane of existence. All these years later, the car is still floating around in Iraq, and recently it was found. A bunch of car nuts gathered together on YouTube seeking help in locating the car, and after a very short time, the car was identified as being located in Erbil, the capital of Kurdistan. What a strange place for a Ferrari! And even though this bizarre abandoned car was found, it's not likely to be purchased anytime soon, as the man who has it and is the current owner is demanding over $1 million for it, and it's not in the best shape after sitting in the sand for so long. Number 7. Russian tanks abandoned in the woods. Have you ever left your military tank sitting in a forest covered in snow, totally unlocked for anyone to just jump in and play with the controls? No? Neither have I. But in the forests of Russia, some civilians discovered a whole platoon of tanks just sitting in the snow. Naturally, the people who found the tanks climbed inside to check them out, fiddling with the ammunition belts and controls. It was only unfortunate that the keys had not been left in the ignition. In a video showing these abandoned tanks, an unnamed reporter quoted, "If you need one, just come and get it." It's a pretty bold statement. The armored tanks were a mixture of T-72 and T-80 battle tanks, which are used in the Russian army. I wouldn't mind getting my hands on one of those, though I'm not exactly sure where I'd park it. According to the locals, the tanks had been sitting there at the time for at least 4 months, totally abandoned. The Russian army was lucky none of the people who happened upon the tanks knew how to hotwire one of them. They may have shown up to reclaim their property months later to find them gone, and a small village of people driving around in their brand new battle tanks. Now, that's a weird story. Number 6. Rare Koenigsegg abandoned in Zurich. Most people don't know what a Koenigsegg Trevita is, which is hardly surprising. There's only a total of 3 of these amazing supercars out there in the world. It's not like you see them just driving around your local neighborhood or being sold at your local dealership. There are only these 3, so that makes it an even bigger shame that one of them was abandoned in a Swiss parking lot in the city of Zurich. But at least the owner of the car parked it in a garage where the weather couldn't damage it. Still, it feels like a waste. This rare supercar is meant to be driven, ogled over, and drooled upon. It shouldn't be collecting dust inside a parking lot. Interestingly enough, nobody even knew the car was abandoned there until it had accumulated over $1,000 in fees. Then people started to notice and pictures started to flood the internet. Even more shocking is that the exact same owner of the first car dumped a second super expensive car and then abandoned it in the exact same parking lot. Nobody really knows what's going on with this guy. Can you imagine owning some of the world's rarest cars and then just randomly dropping them off to collect dust in a parking lot in Switzerland? Number 5. Abandoned house, abandoned Porsche 928 S4. During a nice drive through some mountain roads south of the city of Tokyo in Japan, a passerby noticed an unusual car parked in the grass next to what appeared to be an overgrown and abandoned house. Having a keen eye for cars, the driver pulled over to check out this rare gem besieged by nature and abandoned to the elements. It turned out to be a Porsche 928 S4, an extremely expensive supercar that I would be more than happy to be sitting behind the wheel of. It's certainly much better than taking public transportation. To make the story stranger, the man who discovered this beautiful car never did get any information as to why it was there or why it had been abandoned, but the pictures he took speak for themselves. It must have been abandoned a while ago because weeds and grass and other things that don't belong in a Porsche were wrapped around the car's hood and tires, as if the earth itself was trying to eat the Porsche. And surprisingly, it was actually in great shape. Maybe if I knew how to speak Japanese, I could fly across the world quickly and start demanding some answers. I might end up getting a sweet deal on a sweet car. Number 4. Abandoned Ford Model T survives disaster. It should be no surprise that one of the oldest cars in existence, the Ford Model T, managed to survive the brutal fires in Paradise, California back in 2018. While the fires absolutely devastated the small town of Paradise, filled mostly with retirees, one citizen had to abandon their home and their 103-year-old Ford Model T. While the fires themselves are tragic enough, it is absolutely unthinkable that so many people went through such a rough hell. And it was a very small miracle when Mr. Westbrook returned home to find his Model T had somehow survived the fire with almost no damage, standing strong amid the devastation. If nothing else, this sadly abandoned car showcases the triumph of America's technological prowess. Not even a raging inferno can destroy a Model T. Number 3. The abandoned cars of Fukushima. If you're looking to find one of the largest deposits of abandoned vehicles in perfectly drivable condition, you need to look no further than the Fukushima exclusion zone. Hundreds of cars were abandoned in the blink of an eye back when a 9.0 magnitude earthquake caused massive tsunamis to attack Japan's coastline, flooding an enormous area and killing 16,000 people, while at the same time causing a meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear power station. In the wake of devastation, the entire area was abandoned, and so were a lot of cars. A quick tour of the radiated area will reveal lineups full of cars, many with their doors open and cell phone chargers still plugged in, and the keys still sitting in the ignition. In fact, you could very well get into these cars and just drive them away. Some of the nicer cars you can expect to see include several Cadillacs, a Lincoln Town Car, a Jaguar XJ, a Mercedes S-Class, a Hearse, and even a jet ski. Number 2. Aston Martin abandoned in the woods. Do you know what the coolest car in the world is? I'll give you a hint. It's the car that James Bond drives. That's right, I'm talking about the Aston Martin. And there's no cooler Aston Martin than the classic DB4. first manufactured in the UK in the 1960s. So what was the world's coolest car doing sitting outside someone's house for over 40 years in Massachusetts? Well, it may not surprise you that there are countless classic cars, both American and foreign, collecting dust in people's barns, rotting away in the woods, just like this Aston Martin, and scattered all across the United States in general states of disrepair. Many of the people who own the cars have either forgotten about them or are completely unaware of how valuable the cars are. Whatever the case, whoever ends up buying this newly discovered Aston Martin is gonna have one big restoration on their hands. This classic car is 55 years old. At the time of its manufacturing, it could go from 0 to 60 in 9 seconds and hit a top speed of 140 miles per hour. Number 1. Debt dodger abandons Ferrari Enzo in Dubai. How would you like to live in a place where being in debt is literally illegal? I mean that bouncing a check is such a heinous offense that it could land you in jail. This is some serious business, and expatriates who live in Dubai and find themselves faced with debt problems very often end up abandoning not only their lives, their apartments, and their personal property, but also their vehicles. More often than not, these vehicles can be found abandoned at the airports with keys in the ignition and credit cards stuffed haphazardly in the glove box. One of these amazing cars is a Ferrari Enzo, worth well over $1 million. This particular car is purported to have a British owner who allegedly fled the country after failing to pay their traffic fines. After the car was seized by local police, it apparently became the subject of a theft investigation, along with a Ferrari 599 and a 430 Spider. Whoever the car thief was, if indeed there ever was one, they certainly had good taste. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Which of these abandoned cars breaks your heart the most? Which would you like to restore and have sitting at home in your driveway? Tell me in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to World List, and thanks for watching.